Is it worth the risk to keep on going?
Sure, to win. I mean, that's what we've always done. The money's never been a factor. We raced when we didn't have any.
But after the accident in Turn 4 at the end of the Daytona 500, we've lost Dale Earnhardt.
When Dale Earnhardt's crash report was finally released, the scary details inside shocked everyone who loved car racing forever. Dale Earnhardt Sr. was called the Intimidator because he was so tough and fearless when he drove his race car. For over 20 years, he was one of the best drivers in NASCAR, winning 7 big championships and making fans everywhere love him. His black number 3 car was one of the most famous cars in America, but when doctors looked at his body after he died, they found things so terrible that NASCAR changed all their safety rules right away. February 18th, 2001 started like any normal race day at Daytona International Speedway. Dale was driving his famous black number 3 car, and thousands of fans were watching in the stands. The engines were loud and everyone was excited. Nobody thought that by the end of the day, NASCAR would lose one of its greatest drivers ever. Dale had been racing for more than 20 years. He had won 7 championships and lived through many crashes that would have ended other drivers' careers. He was tough and brave, and it seemed like nothing could hurt him on the racetrack. That's why what happened next was so shocking. During the last lap of the Daytona 500 race, Dale was doing what he always did best, helping his teammates. His son, Dale Jr., and another driver named Michael Waltrip were racing for first and second place up ahead. Dale Sr. was behind them, blocking other cars from passing them. This was a smart move that showed how good he was at racing. But as they went into the 4th turn, with the finish line just seconds away, something went wrong. Another car, driven by Sterling Marlin, touched Dale's car from behind. It wasn't a hard hit, just a gentle bump that happens all the time in racing. But when you're going 160 miles per hour, even the smallest touch can be very dangerous. Dale's car started sliding down the track, then suddenly shot up toward the outside wall. Another car, driven by Ken Schrader, came alongside him, and the 2 cars crashed into each other. Then, Dale's number 3 car hit the concrete wall head first. The crash didn't look that bad from watching it. There was no fire, no explosion, and no dramatic flipping. It just looked like a car hitting a wall and sliding to a stop. But something was terribly wrong. Ken Schrader was the first person to reach Dale's car after the crash. As a race car driver himself, Ken had seen plenty of crashes. He knew what a normal accident looked like and how drivers usually acted after hitting the wall. But when Ken looked through the window of the number 3 car, his face changed completely. Ken later told reporters that he would never describe what he saw that day. He said he couldn't talk about it, not because he wanted to keep Dale's secrets, but because what he saw was too scary to put into words. Medical crews rushed to help Dale within minutes. They worked quickly to get him out of the car and into an ambulance. But even as they put him on a stretcher, something felt different. Usually, after a crash, drivers would be complaining about being hurt or asking about their car, but this time, there was only silence. The ambulance raced to Halifax Medical Center, which was only 2 miles from the speedway. Doctors and nurses were ready and waiting. They had helped many injured race car drivers before and knew how to handle even the most serious cases. And so the two met with friendship. And the doctors, but this time, their skills wouldn't be enough. While fans were celebrating Michael Waltrip's victory and Dale Jr.'s second-place finish, a much sadder story was happening at the hospital. The medical team was finding things that would later be written in the crash report, things so disturbing that they would haunt the racing community forever. At 5:16 in the evening, doctors made the announcement that changed NASCAR history. Dale Earnhardt Sr. was dead. The man who seemed like he could never be beaten, who had survived every challenge the sport could throw at him, was gone. But the real shock was still to come when the autopsy revealed exactly how it happened. After Dale's death was announced, everyone wanted answers. How could such a small-looking crash kill one of the toughest drivers in NASCAR history? The accident happened so fast that even the television cameras barely caught it. Most fans in the stands didn't even realize something serious had happened until much later. NASCAR officials immediately began looking into every detail of the crash. They studied video footage from many different angles, looking at each frame to understand what went wrong. They looked at the car's damage, the angle it hit the wall, and how fast Dale was going when he crashed. Everything seemed normal for a racing accident until they started looking deeper. The car itself told a strange story. The damage wasn't as bad as crashes that other drivers had walked away from. The inside of the car looked mostly fine. The steering wheel was still in place, and even the seat appeared to be positioned correctly. From the outside, it looked like the kind of crash that should have resulted in maybe a broken bone or two, not death. But looks can fool you, and the scary details found in Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s crash report would soon explain why this crash that looked survivable actually killed him. The medical examiner's findings would show that the real damage wasn't visible from the outside. It happened inside Dale's body in ways that were both shocking and heartbreaking. Racing experts began to realize that they didn't understand crashes as well as they thought they did. If Dale Earnhardt could die in what looked like a routine accident, then every driver on the track was in more danger than anyone had imagined. The sport needed answers, and they needed them fast. The Volusia County Medical Examiner's Office was used to handling difficult cases, but Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s autopsy was unlike anything they had dealt with before. The entire racing world was watching and waiting for answers. Every finding would be studied, every detail would be talked about, and every conclusion would shape the future of the sport. Dr. Thomas Parsons, the medical examiner, began looking at Dale's body, knowing that his report would be read by millions of people. He had to be careful, accurate, and completely honest about what he found. The troubling details he was about to uncover would shock even experienced medical professionals. The first thing Dr. Parsons noticed was that Dale's injuries were not what he expected to see from such a crash. There were broken ribs, a broken ankle, and damage to his chest from the safety harness. These were serious injuries, but they were the kind that drivers could survive and get better from. The real problem was something else entirely. As Dr. Parsons continued his examination, he discovered the injury that actually killed Dale Earnhardt Sr. It was something called a basilar skull fracture, a break at the base of the skull that affects the area around the brainstem. This type of injury is almost always deadly because it stops the brain from being able to control the rest of the body. The fracture was described as a ring fracture, meaning it went all the way around the base of Dale's skull. It happened when his head whipped forward violently during the crash, then snapped back just as hard. The motion lasted only a split second, but it was enough to cause devastating damage. What made this discovery so disturbing was that it meant Dale died instantly. There was no pain, no struggle, no chance to fight for his life. One moment he was racing, and the next moment he was gone. For a man who had built his reputation on being tough and never giving up, it was a heartbreaking end. As Dr. Parsons continued examining Dale's body, he made another disturbing discovery that would send shockwaves through the racing community. The safety equipment that was supposed to protect Dale had failed in ways nobody expected. The 5-point safety harness that held Dale in his seat showed signs of extreme stress. The belts had left deep marks on his body, proof that they had been working hard to keep him secure during the crash. But something had gone wrong with the left lap belt, the part that goes across a driver's waist on the left side. According to the crash report, this important piece of safety equipment had broken completely. The belt that was supposed to hold Dale's lower body in place had snapped, allowing him to slide forward in his seat during the crash. This movement may have contributed to the fatal head injury that killed him. The discovery of the broken belt raised disturbing questions about NASCAR's safety standards. How could a piece of equipment that drivers trusted with their lives simply break apart? Was it a manufacturing problem? Had it been put in incorrectly? Or was there something about the crash that created forces too strong for any belt to handle? As more experts looked at Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s crash report, they noticed something deeply troubling. Dale Earnhardt wasn't the first NASCAR driver to die from a basilar skull fracture. In fact, 3 other drivers had died from the same type of fatal injury in the months before the Daytona 500. Adam Petty, Kenny Irwin, and Tony Roper. This wasn't a coincidence. It was like a disease spreading through the sport. NASCAR had a deadly problem, and the sports leaders hadn't recognized it until it was too late. The disturbing details found in Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s crash report were just proof that a hidden danger had been putting drivers' lives at risk for months. Dr. Randy Hanslick, an expert medical examiner, looked at the 7-page crash report and confirmed everyone's worst fears. The basilar skull fracture was caused by the violent whip-like motion of Dale's head during the crash. It was a problem with physics that had a simple solution, but NASCAR hadn't required drivers to use it. The solution was called a HANDS device, head and neck support equipment that connected a driver's helmet to their shoulders. This device would have prevented Dale's head from snapping forward and backward with such deadly force. It had been available for years, but most drivers, including Dale, refused to wear it. Dale had been one of the HANDS device's biggest critics. He thought it was uncomfortable and limited his ability to turn his head while racing. He believed that racing was supposed to be dangerous, and that too much safety equipment would take away from the sport's excitement. Sadly, this attitude may have cost him his life. Robert Hubbard, the inventor of the HANDS device, studied the crash report and came to a heartbreaking conclusion. He said that while he couldn't promise that the HANDS device would have saved everybody in this kind of crash, it would have helped Dale. Those words would haunt the racing community forever. The most disturbing detail of all was how preventable Dale's death had been. The technology existed to save his life. The knowledge was there. The equipment was available. But pride, tradition, and resistance to change had kept it out of his car on that fatal February day. NASCAR's own investigation into Dale's death cost over $1 million and took months to complete. And through the course of a war, there was a woman named Dale's death that cost $1.5 million and took months to complete. The 300-page report they published was the most comprehensive safety study in racing history. What they found confirmed the disturbing details from the crash report and revealed how many things had gone wrong at exactly the same time to create such a tragedy. The investigation team recreated every second of the crash using high-speed cameras, computer simulations, and crash test dummies. They determined that Dale's car hit the wall at a specific angle that concentrated all the impact force directly into the area where he was sitting. The speed of the crash was estimated at between 157 and 161 miles per hour. While this sounds incredibly fast, it was actually within the range of crashes that other drivers had survived. The difference was the angle and the way Dale's head moved during the impact. Using tests with cars identical to Dale's, investigators measured the forces involved in the crash. Dale experienced what they called a crash impulse that lasted about 80 milliseconds, less than 1/10 of a second. But in that brief moment, his body was subjected to forces equivalent to falling from a height of nearly 62 feet. The most disturbing discovery was that Dale's death could have been prevented in multiple ways. The HANDS device would have saved his life. Softer barriers on the walls would have reduced the impact forces. Even small changes to the seat position or harness design might have made the difference. But perhaps the most important finding was that NASCAR had ignored warning signs for too long. The string of basilar skull fractures in other drivers should have triggered immediate action. Instead, the sport had chosen to react only after its biggest star had paid the ultimate price. While nothing could bring Dale Earnhardt Sr. back, the disturbing details found in his crash report led to changes that have saved hundreds of lives. NASCAR used the tragedy as motivation to completely transform racing safety, creating a legacy that Dale himself would have been proud of. Within months of the crash report's release, the HANDS device became mandatory for all NASCAR drivers. The same equipment that Dale had refused to wear was now required by rule. Every driver who climbed into a race car would be protected by the technology that could have saved the Intimidator's life. NASCAR also introduced safer barriers at every track, soft walls made of steel and foam that absorb crash energy instead of reflecting it back at the car. These barriers reduce impact forces by up to 70%, making crashes that would have been fatal much more survivable. The cars themselves were completely redesigned with safety as the top priority. The new cars featured wider frames, reinforced cockpits, and energy-absorbing materials throughout. Driver seats were moved away from doors, and roll cages were strengthened using lessons learned from Dale's crash. The results speak for themselves. Since Dale Earnhardt Sr. died in 2001, not a single driver has died during competition in NASCAR's 3 major series. There have been spectacular crashes, cars that have flipped and caught fire, and impacts that looked much worse than Dale's accident, but every driver has walked away. Dale Earnhardt Jr. has often said that his father's greatest victory wasn't any of his 7 championships or 76 race wins. It was the safety revolution that his death inspired. Every time a driver survives a crash that would have been fatal in 2001, Dale Sr.'s legacy grows stronger. The disturbing details found in Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s crash report were heartbreaking to read, but they became the foundation for the safest era in racing history. While fans still miss the Intimidator's fierce driving and competitive spirit, they can take comfort in knowing that his final contribution to the sport was saving the lives of future generations of racers. What started as a tragic loss became the reason for the greatest safety revolution in motorsports history. Today, every driver who walks away from a crash owes their life to the lessons learned from that heartbreaking February day in 2001.